All right, Matthew Barry's here with DraftKings. What's going on, buddy?
Hey man, I'm loving life. We're in week 2. I have a tremendous amount of Tyler Warren on my fantasy teams.
Ooh,
No complaints.
wow. Okay, tell me before we get started. You're in Stamford, Connecticut, beautiful Stamford, Connecticut. I live down the road.
Okay.
I took no big deal. I took golf lessons in Stamford, Connecticut last year. It's
Did you like them?
Did I
Did
like
you
the
like
golf
your
lessons?
teacher?
Yes. I got better. It was like an indoor simulator, as you have to do in the Northeast of America. But
For
I
sure.
got appreciably better.
Because I work obviously in Stanford at NBC Sports. This is where I'm currently doing this from a room here at NBC Sports, and I'm an avid, although not particularly good, golfer. I've just taken it up over the last 2 years, and so I'm sort of self-taught. If you count Instagram videos, I have a friend I have a friend that's like a 6 handicap. Like he's really good, he's like really good,
Mm-hmm.
and so he'll take me out, and so he's given me some pointers and that kind of stuff. But yeah, so if there's a good golf teacher in the Stanford area,
well, offline.
let me know. So you'll text me
this.
off air and let me.
We're gonna offline about this. All right. So I do not play fantasy football every single year. Sometimes I quit because it gets so emotional. And I think I've explained this to you before. I can't when I'm playing with like my home league, as they call it, and then I finish at 9th. Everybody's like, "Hey, you get paid for this, dumbass!" And meanwhile, I'm losing to guys who are contractors in Orlando, and I'm sitting there saying, "Okay, fine." So that was when I was younger, but I am playing this year with some colleagues.
Can I ask you a question real quickly, Kevin? Do you really know contractors in Orlando? Because I don't think you do.
I do. One of my best. I'm from Orlando, and everybody in Orlando grows up to be either a contractor or in some sort of illicit dealings. And it's sometimes both.
That's Florida. That makes sense.
Sometimes both. I
was just going to say,
never. You have to be very careful when you're signing anything in Florida, because you're either signing a deal like to get a house built, or you're signing your life away. So I don't. Yes. It's a nice little lottery we play down there.
There's no question.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so that's
right. So, but you're in and out, which is weird. People are usually all in on fantasy football, or they're all out, and so you sort of.
I go between, depending on who wants it, and also how serious is the league going to be. The other part of it is, and this is one of the reasons I'm very careful about what type of bets I make on all sports, is I know how emotional I get when I would say my biggest per week bankroll I have would be on golf. I know how emotional I get when Brian Harmon costs me $80. And so the idea that then I would be interacting with the football version of Brian Harmon, I have to be very careful to take emotion out of it, Matthew. So that's the other part of fantasy for me. I can't be mad. I'll give you a good example. The first person on this show was Ryan Fitzpatrick earlier today. If Fitz had been a league loser for me, I come into that, even if it's 5 years later, I come into that saying, Ryan Fitzpatrick, I want to beat you up.
Yeah, no, I get that. I get that you have to sort of be able to emotionally separate the player from, your fantasy results.
The art from the artist. Yes, of course.
Yeah, exactly. The art from the artist. That's an excellent way to put it. So, well, yeah. And if it makes you upset, Kevin, then you shouldn't do it. Fantasy's fun, right? The reason at least for me, when I'm telling you to play fantasy sports or to bet on sports, because I'm a spokesperson for DraftKings. I'm a brand ambassador for the company, and so whether I'm telling you to bet on sports or play fantasy football, I'm doing it with the idea like, well, this is fun, and you shouldn't do anything that makes you upset. Like you shouldn't bet more than you can afford to lose. You shouldn't play a game that makes you upset. I mean, I will say that's part of the fun of, I think either one is like having action in the game and being passionate about it. And that's why we love sports, because, our teams don't always win, but we love the aspect of rooting and having some action in a game. And and that makes, I honestly think the losses make the wins sweeter. If all you did was win all the time, it's no fun. Right.
Well, when I gamble, I win all the time. That's why I do it more than fantasy.
Sure. That makes sense. It's boring.
It's 100% profit.
Yeah. But like for example, I'm a Commanders fan, Kevin, as you and I have talked about many times. I am a diehard Commanders fan since I was 5 years old, and so prior to last year, the 2 decades previously, the 2 decades of the Snyder era were awful as a sports fan, as a fan of Washington's professional football team. And that's what made last year so sweet, is that, like, because we'd been through the desert, all of us, Washington fans, we'd been through the desert with no hope, with no sign of life. And all of a sudden, Snyder is suddenly out. Never thought I'd in my lifetime that I would get a new owner
never.
of the team that I love. And so Josh Harris is in. He brings in an awesome group of people, including a great general manager, great head coach. And we draft a stud at quarterback. And, all of a sudden, like, next 15 years, I got a quarterback.
It's incredible. It's a life-changing thing.
Yes.
It's a life-changing thing. But anyway, not to go too far down it, I like gambling more than I like fantasy, because fantasy is almost a different muscle than the gambling part of it. If I'm watching a college football game and I'm saying, man, I think Clemson's overrated, that's the same thing. For fantasy, for me, it's hard to say, okay, well, should I really grind on Ollie Gordon? What's my, it's a different thing than, are the Dolphins good or bad? That's how I view it. But
no, and by the way, you're right. You're right. There are some underlying aspects of both, which is that both give you interest in games that you might not normally care about.
Correct.
Right. But to your point, I think fantasy is more social. It's more, it sort of depends, right? I mean, like, my oldest son is a big gambler as well. And so he's 27, and we'll text. So anyone's just thinking, like, I can't believe it. And so, yeah, my oldest son's 27, but, like, we'll text back and forth about, a bet that we like or whatever. I'm going to tell you, hey, here's something I like. And so we'll go back and forth during the game or a match. We bet on UFC a lot together. He loves UFC. And so, like, we'll do that, which is a bonding thing for me and him. But I feel like fantasy, it's your league, or whether it's a group of people you work with, that you went to college with, your family, your friends. It's more of a social aspect where sports betting is fun entertainment, but it's more solo, to your point. Like, I think Clemson's overrated, and I'm going to prove it. And I'm going to prove it with money. Yeah. And now I'm going to watch the Tigers hopefully lose, or at least not cover. And then I'm going to prove to myself I'm smarter, and I've just made money doing it. So they're both fun. I just think they're slightly different value props to the user as well. Can I, as long as we're talking about betting and fun and everything like that, can I slip in a plug here?
Absolutely.
Okay. Because one of the reasons why, so I mentioned I'm a brand ambassador for DraftKings, and they have a promotion going on right now called the Ghost Leg. And so Ghost Leg Parlay. And so here's what it is. Basically, from their words, they're turning losers into winners. You have at least a 3-leg parlay. And if one of the legs loses, like the first 2 legs hit, but the third leg loses, with the Ghost Leg Parlay, DraftKings basically makes that third leg a ghost, makes it disappear, and now your 2-leg parlay has won. So they're doing it for this Sunday for week 2 of the NFL season. So I'm here on behalf of DraftKings promoting that. So, listen, as you know, I'm a company man.
So normally, I want to do inside baseball here.
Yeah.
Normally, I give a runway at the end for the plug. Okay? This is important. There are 2 people in history who've slipped the plug in the middle of the show. One is Matthew Berry just now, and the other is Coach Prime, Deion Sanders. He did not. He was rolling, and he goes, "We're not getting to the plug quick enough," and he did it. I feel like maybe you're the Coach Prime of the gambling space, Matthew Berry.
You know what? High praise indeed. I literally thought, Kevin, I thought you were going to say, and the second person was Matthew Berry on Radio Row at Super Bowl.
No. Well, actually, so my producer, Miles Patola, just texted me that Cameron Jordan also did it.
Okay.
So that's the big 3. The big 3, as I call them.
Well, you know what? The reason I did it there was...
It was natural. It was organic.
It was natural, organic. I was planning on... because DraftKings, again, behind the curtain here, DraftKings says as part of my deal with them to be a brand ambassador, and I've been with the company for years and years and years. Part of my deal with them is for me to do some press, to do exactly what I just did, which is to promote, whatever they've got going on. And this week, it's the Ghost Leg Parlay promotion. And so normally when you do these things, and Kevin, you've done this as well, when you've been on the other side where you've been interviewed as well, and you're promoting something, usually you're hopeful that the host is going to, like, yes, at your point, whether it's at the end or the beginning or whatever, they're going to, quote, get the plug in. But I'm just like sort of thinking to myself, well, we're having this whole conversation about the enjoyment of betting, and that's the whole point
versus
of this
fantasy.
particular
Yeah.
thing. So it felt organic as opposed to like if I didn't mention it, and then we get to the end and we were talking about whatever Avengers Endgame, and then oh by the way, you're here on behalf of DraftKings, and then
Yeah.
we're shoving it in. So
It's a good point. It's a good point. You're a salesman. You're doing great. That's why you're getting all the funding for your company, is you know how
yeah,
to
it's
sell.
going well. Fantasy
It's
Life is
going
going well.
well. Fantasy
FantasyLife.com.
life.
I'm throwing a free plug. Fantasy
Wow,
Life.
look at that. 2 plugs.
Look at that.
2 plugs.
Look at I really am the Coach Prime. Should I just yeah, do that.
All right, let's talk about fantasy for a second. We have 1 week in the books. Is there someone you've changed your mind on already in the fantasy space this year?
Yeah, there's a couple people. I'll say Harold Fannin, the rookie tight end.
Great
Cleveland
one.
Browns. I like he was getting some preseason buzz, and we were hearing like, oh yeah, the Browns want to use him, but it's a rookie tight end out of Bowling Green, and so I thought, okay, well he'd be a part, but like, let's be clear, they have David Njoku, who is one of the best tight ends in the NFL. Forget fantasy football for a second; he's very good at fantasy football, but he's as good a blocking tight end as there is in the NFL, and Njoku is awesome, and so it's just like, what kind of role? And I know they like Jerry Jeudy and Cedric Tillman, and so what kind of role do we see for Harold Fannin initially out of the gate? Again, maybe a deep sleeper. Maybe you grab him at the end of your bench. And we talked about my show as kind of a deep sleeper in the preseason because he was getting some buzz. But I did not expect what he did in week 1, and I think that so I've changed my mind on Fannin. Like I don't think that was a fluke. Admittedly, they were playing the Bengals. And if you look at the Browns' upcoming schedule, like their next 5 games are brutal. Like 5 of the toughest teams in the NFL, including this week, they're on the road at Baltimore. But I thought Flacco looked competent. I thought the Browns should have won that game. And so sort of, that's one that I've changed my mind on. That was somebody that I thought maybe he's a factor at the end of the year, the way a lot of rookie tight ends are that aren't named Brock Bowers or Tyler Warren. I think he's legit.
For me, the hesitation with Fannin, this is pre-draft and then preseason. My alarm bells go off whenever anybody says, well, you got to have a plan to use him. So, we got to have a plan to use him. How are you going to use him? Because it's got to be an OC who's on the whiteboard. And guess what? Stefanski had a freaking plan. He was everywhere. And like that, to me, that's the exception, not the rule. But Stefanski's a really good coach. I think we all agree on that. He's just been dealt an extremely bad hand with the quarterback position and some of the team building stuff and the roster stuff and injury stuff and all that stuff. But he's won Coach of the Year. I have completely changed my mind on Harold Fannin, and I regret not. My tight ends are bad this year. I took a flyer on Isaiah Likely. We'll see about his health, and then Jonnu Smith, because I assumed that it was funny. I was laughing, but like, Arthur Smith always finds the most boring guy in the offense to give carries and touches and receptions to, and Jonnu Smith felt like that to me.
By the way, I don't think you're going to be wrong on Jonnu Smith. Like this is something that came up on my show. I'm going to get a third plug in here. Look at me. I'm going to go for the record. Kevin, on my own show, Fantasy Football Happy Hour, which is daily on YouTube and Peacock and wherever you get your podcasts. In the preseason on Fantasy Football Happy Hour, we discussed Jonnu Smith, and I said this more than once. I said it is going to drive you crazy how much Jonnu Smith is used in this Steelers offense. Everyone that's drafting DK Metcalf high, it's going to drive you crazy how much Jonnu Smith and Kenneth Gainwell are used in Arthur Smith's offense. I tell my daughters all the time, I want you to find a guy that looks at you the way Arthur Smith looks at Jonnu Smith. Because listen, like had him in Tennessee, had him in Atlanta, brought him now to Pittsburgh. Mm-hmm. Gave Jonnu Smith like an end around, and like they're going to use him. They're going to do a lot of 2 tight end sets. They like Jonnu Smith's athleticism and his versatility. Obviously Arthur Smith has had him in multiple stops, so I think you're going to be okay with Jonnu Smith. I am not buying the Steelers. Probably a better question is, who have you not changed your mind on? And I have not changed my mind on Aaron Rodgers. I thought he played well, but everyone is just like, oh my God, I'm like, at least from a fantasy football perspective, that game was bananas, right? It was just a weird game. Everyone expected it to be low scoring. It was very high scoring. Similar to the Browns, I think the Jets should have won that game. One of the
Mm-hmm.
touchdown passes from Aaron Rodgers was just like a little handoff, right? One of them was on a broken coverage. He was fine, but they won that game because, in part because, they got this crazy DK Metcalf catch, bounces off him, bounces off somebody else, bounces back to DK Metcalf, and then Boswell hits a 60-yarder. Now, Boswell's awesome, but and that's not unexpected, but, and they just didn't have the right play call. The Jets didn't have the right play call on some of the 2-point conversion stuff. But Justin Fields' QBR in that game was like 79, and Rodgers was like 62. And I get it; it's Rodgers against Jets, and he's Aaron Rodgers, and he's a first ballot Hall of Famer, and one of the greatest to ever play the game. But I just, I'm getting a lot of questions like, Rodgers threw 4 touchdown passes. Should I pick him up? And is he viable? And I'm just like, in fantasy, no, I don't believe he is. I think that's the best. I think that's the best game we'll have fantasy wise. I think that is the best game we will see from Aaron Rodgers all year.
Yeah, especially if he can't use his legs like that. That lowers the ceiling. What's the number one question you're getting this week?
I just think people are panicking, right? They're panicking on the Dolphins. They're panicking on the Bengals, Nico Collins, like some of the big name stars that just really disappointed in week 1. So that's what people are worried about. That people are worried about the Seahawks backfield, the Ken Walker, Zach Charbonnet.
I have Ken Walker.
Yeah, that's going to be, you're in for a long season.
I have Bill. I have your boy Bill and the Commanders, though. We're fine.
Yes. No, he is. Listen, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, as everyone calls him, Bill. We talked about him on the show today. 10 of 23 team running back touches. He had 43%, but he got 50% of the red zone rushes. If there's a concern, though, he only played 29% of the snaps, but I thought he looked explosive. He had 10 carries. 3 of them went for 10 or more yards. So, the explosiveness is there. Austin Eckler's not going away, but I think it does become kind of a two-headed committee. There was concerns in the preseason. Is Chris Rodriguez or Jerry McNichols is going to be like a 3-head committee? And of course, Jaden's always a threat to run himself. But I think Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt is going to wind up the year as like a top 25 fantasy running back with upside for more if he gets a little lucky with the touchdowns. One of the things we talked about in the preseason on Fantasy Football Happy Hour, though, was that Ken Walker is hurt, and Zach Charbonnet had an unbelievable preseason. And then you sort of think about Clint Kubiak, brand new offense coordinator. And we always said, everyone assumes that just because the way it's always been in Seattle is when Ken Walker's healthy, he's the guy. And then when he's out, Charbonnet gets the work. But really, it's always Ken Walker's job. And I'm like, Kubiak's a new offense coordinator. And he comes into this thinking, I haven't talked to Clint Kubiak. I've never met him. I don't know. But I have to assume if you're Clint Kubiak, it's like, should I do the stuff that got the 3 previous guys fired?
Yeah.
Or should I change it up, maybe? And so instead of, and here's a guy, he comes into camp and Charbonnet is awesome all through preseason and awesome against the Niners in week 1. Or Ken Walker, who's been banged up and probably banged up. He's awesome when he's healthy. But, that was one of our calls was that we preferred Zach Charbonnet at cost in drafts this year more than Ken Walker. I did a column in the preseason called 10 lists of 10. And so it's 10 lists of 10, right? And so one of my lists of 10 was my 10 chicken players. The famous Jim Harbaugh quote, he doesn't eat chicken because it's a nervous bird.
Yeah.
Right? You remember this quote? So these are the 10 players that make me nervous. Are they good players? Yes. Are they being drafted where they should be? Yes, they are. But they make me nervous for just reasons that just vibes. And Ken Walker was on that list because I'm just I just don't know how Zach Charbonnet goes back in the bottle, man. Every time he's gotten a chance, he's been awesome. And that's an offense that's looking for sparks.
Yeah. Last thing for you. Maybe you can get in maybe a 5th plug in this if you'd like. But what are you looking for in week 2? What's the one guy where you're like, this could go in a lot of directions? I mean, you mentioned the Bengals. We got to see them get off the schneid a little bit. What are you looking at?
I think the Dolphins.
Yeah.
The Dolphins, the Dolphins looked awful against the Colts, right? Awful. And so we in the fantasy world, this is somebody that I may have changed my mind on. I want to give one more week, right? But it's Tyreek Hill was a guy that was a top 5 fantasy wide receiver 2 years ago, right? And And Jalen Waddle dealt with injuries, but he's been good before. And Devon Achane has been terrific anytime he's been okay. So as long as Tua was healthy, we thought this is a pretty good fantasy offense because it plays at high speed, and the touches are fairly concentrated between those three guys. Jonnu Smith takes a 19% target share with him to Pittsburgh, and they didn't really replace him. All due respect to Darren Waller,
who, by the way, might not even play this year, according to Mike McDaniel today.
I mean, right. And by the way, Darren Waller, one of my favorite players in the NFL. His story is amazing. I am rooting for Darren Waller, but we will see.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, right. He's been out of football. So we will see. But so now they're at home against a Patriots team that just got lit up by the Raiders. Right? Last week, only one team gave up more passing yards than the New England Patriots. I know Gonzalez was hurt, but still, I'm just saying, like, Geno tore them apart. So the Dolphins are at home against a secondary that they should be okay about, and they're favored. The Dolphins, despite the disaster that was that Colts game, they're favored at home. And so I think I want to see production from Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. I want to see Tua look like what we've seen him look like before, because the entire offense just looked like a disaster. And I think if you look at their upcoming schedule, I think if they lose to the Patriots, I think a teardown is coming quicker than later. And I think Tyreek Hill could easily be traded. The obvious one is, does he go back to the Chiefs? I've heard the Steelers mentioned as well. But by the way, here's a quick fantasy tip. Grab Malik Washington at the end of your fantasy draft, end of your bench in your fantasy team, because I do think Tyreek Hill gets traded this year, and I do think when he does, Malik Washington's going to have that role, and I really like Malik Washington. He played the Tyreek Hill role in the preseason when Tyreek was out. Crazy fast, young player. They like him a lot in Miami.
Here's my plug. Matthew Berry's an amazing person. Thank you, buddy.
Love you, Kevin.